And good evening and welcome to tonight's Board of Adjustment meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. On the agenda, our first action item is approval of minutes from June 24th, ages ago. Anyone with corrections or recommendation?
Move approval.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is a public comment period, limit time of 15 minutes. We ask members of the public to speak to the board regarding matters not on tonight's agenda, nor currently pending before the board. And if you decide to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name for the record, and that you are a resident of the city, and keep your remarks to under 3 minutes. Any takers? Excellent. All right. The next item in the agenda, which I'm assuming everyone is here for, is a public hearing proposal for a variance at 403 North Polk. Permit application LUP 25004.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We are here tonight for a variance request at 403 North Polk Street. The applicants, Lincoln and Manisha Wilson, are requesting a variance to reduce the rear yard setback for a proposed building addition on a lot located at 403 North Polk Street. The applicants are proposing to switch the established front and street side yards and reduce the required 20-foot rear yard setback to 17 feet to accommodate a proposed 912 square foot addition on the west side of the house. The proposed addition includes a mudroom, 2-car garage, and a bonus room above the garage. The applicants came before the board on April 14th, 2025 with a similar petition, LUP 2025-0007. There are two main differences between that April application and this one. The first is the removal of numerous building additions that are permitted by right, and the western garage addition moved from 5 feet from the western property line to 12 feet from the western property line. This diagram shows with Polk Street on the right and C Street on the bottom there, the existing house in the middle. The gray represents building additions that were part of the April petition, and the new garage addition is outlined in that red rectangle. Note that the setbacks went from 5 feet to 12 feet on that west property line. Here, seen from the aerial, the 403 North Polk is right in the center of what is the Fort Russell neighborhood. We have Van Buren to the west, Howard Street to the east, and we're sitting right here on the corner of Polk and C Street. Close up, this lot houses a single-family dwelling with the access traditionally taken off of Polk Street, which has historically been considered the front for setback and addressing purposes, while C Street is considered our street side. West property line is considered the rear, the north is the normal side yard. The access is taken off of Polk Street, and vehicular access is taken off this southwest corner and goes behind the house. The lot is relatively flat with a slight decline in topography in the northwest corner. This lot and all surrounding lots are zoned R3, medium density residential, with R4 further west and some R2 to the east. The medium density residential R3 zoning district provides for increased density over that allowed by the R2 zoning district by permitting different types of housing construction. and is appropriate where activity levels are moderate or our moderate terrain permits, construction of larger structures and public systems and neighborhood facilities can accommodate the greater intensity of land use. Uses permitted within the R3 zone include single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, twin homes, townhomes, market community gardens, group and child care facilities, and public parks and recreation. In the R3 medium density residential zone, minimum lot sizes for single-family dwellings are 6,000 square feet. For two-family dwellings, it's 7,000 square feet. The subject site is 11,050 square feet. Minimum lot width for single and two-family dwellings is 60 feet. The subject site is 85 feet. Setbacks in the R3 zone, 15 feet along the front. Street side is 13 feet, side is 5 feet, and the rear is 20 feet. Because this is a corner lot, that is part of this variance request, is switching the front and the sides. Property owners on undeveloped corner lots are able to choose which street frontage to designate as the front as they're building a property. Likewise, properties that are already developed, if they meet all of the required setbacks, can also change what is considered the front or the side. The rear property line is always opposite the designated front yard property line. This subject property has historically designated the front property line along Polk Street and the rear property line as the west property line. And since both C and Polk Streets are designated local residential streets in the comprehensive plan, setbacks on those streets are measured from the back of the sidewalk and not from the property line. This diagram, which is available in your packets if you don't want to look up, shows the existing setbacks and buildable area of the lot with the current configuration, with the front being on Polk Street. Notice the setbacks to the south and to the east are measured from the sidewalks. And on the east, they barely reach the property line, so the buildable edge of the lot is right at the property line. And same with the south. The required setback doesn't quite reach the property line, but since we restrict building to the subject property, it's restricted to the property line. From the west, you have the rear 20-foot required setback, and on the north is the side setback of 5 feet, with additional buildable area outside of those setbacks. With the proposed reconfiguration, with C Street being the front, still the property buildable area to the east and to the south ends at the property line because the setbacks don't reach it. On the west, the automatic side yard setback would be 5 feet. The applicants are proposing that potentially be increased to 12 feet if the board approves. And up here on the north is the 20-foot setback, and the bit of the house that bumps out approximately 3 feet is the reason for this variance request, because that, with the reconfiguration of the lot, it does not meet that required rear setback. Here's the proposed garage addition sitting right on the proposed potential 12-foot setback line on the west side. Here's a diagram of the house as it currently sits and is built on the lot, with the configuration with Polk Street being the front and the relevant setbacks. And here it is with the proposed garage with those same setbacks. Here's an elevation diagram of the building addition as viewed from Polk Street, looking at the front of the house, but the side of the addition, and is viewed from C Street, looking at the side of the house and the front of the addition. Then from the west, looking east, and from the north, looking south. This request is a variance from a required setback standard, and as such, it needs to meet the 3 criteria set forth for variances. The first is that the applicant must demonstrate that special conditions and/or circumstances exist which are peculiar to the property, such as size, shape, topography, or location, which are not applicable to other properties similarly situated in the same zoning district. The applicant has demonstrated that because of the aforementioned special conditions of the property, application of the provisions of the zoning code would impose undue hardship and would deprive the property owner of rights commonly enjoyed by owners of other property similarly situated in the same zoning district under the terms of the zoning code. And that granting of the variance will not be in conflict with the public interest or injurious to property or persons in the vicinity of the subject property. Staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment conduct the public hearing and, upon consideration of testimony received, approve the variance application, or approve the variance application with conditions, or deny the variance application, or take other actions as deemed appropriate. And then the board shall direct staff to develop relevant criteria and standards based on the board's decision to be reviewed at an upcoming meeting. On a side note, we have received two bits of additional public comment that are there before you that were received outside of the 5-day submittal deadline. And it is at the discretion of the chair whether those get included in the record. And staff is here for any questions you might have.
Lucy, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this question since you're so young. The question
best
is,
compliment all day.
in the zoning code, and Mike, you can chime in if you want, you're too young too, but there used to, in my recollection, there used to be something in the zoning code that stated a certain percentage of the square foot of the lot needed to be in the rear yard. Do you recollect that, Mike or Lucy?
There's just a provision for accessory structures that they can't take up more than 50% of the rear yard area. So that's the only requirement that I'm aware of. And it's certain size accessory structures.
And go ahead, please. Do either of you happen to know the public right-of-way on C Street and Polk Street on these blocks?
How wide the street width is?
Well, not
The
the street
right-of-way
width, but the public right-of-way
Are those generally
It's
80 feet?
on both.
on both.
Yep.
So
You happen to know the street width?
I did a month ago. I'm not recollecting it today.
I would assume it's between 20 and 28 feet in width. I mean, there's parking, I believe, on one side of the street, but it's an older street, so they're relatively narrow. So I'd probably say just a little over 20 feet in width. Typically, you have a 12-foot travel aisle and then a 8-foot wide parallel parking space on one side. Usually equates to 20 to 22 feet in width.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. So we will open the public hearing. The way a public hearing works is we will ask the applicant to create their, or make their argument. Then we will ask for testimony in favor. We will ask for testimony in opposition. And then lastly, we will ask for testimony of a general nature. When you come up to speak, please come up to the podium, state your name and your city of residence. And for the record, am I correct on that? And let's go.
What do I need to do to
You able to go get that? Yeah. Should just be up on the bottom if you scroll over the PowerPoint.
There it is. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Lincoln Wilson. I'm here with my wife, Manisha. We're here on this application. I've seen a few of you before at the last hearing we did on this, but a few of you are new. Obviously, I know Tim is a local in Fort Russell, but we are here because we are really working to try to come up with a plan that we think addresses the concerns that our neighbors raised last time, and to try to come up with something that we think serves the neighborhood and serves the needs of our family and serves the interests of this lot in particular. So we're seeking, as Lucy mentioned, a 3-foot variance from the rear setback requirement in exchange for a 7-foot addition to the side setback to facilitate construction of an attached 2-car garage. Just some background on the project. Our home is the 403 North Polk. It's a Greek Revival home, rare in Idaho. This one was built in 1902. It's one of the contributing homes to the Fort Russell Historic Designation. We purchased it and renovated it in 2017. We were pleased to receive an Orchid Award for our renovations in 2019. And we've been happily living as part of the neighborhood. I actually grew up across the street, but we've been there for 8 years now. And life surprised us, or God surprised us in 2023 with a new baby long after we thought we were done. And we were, as older parents, the baby came with special needs, and we were looking for a better way to care for her. And because we're older parents now, we're hoping that we can have an attached garage to facilitate taking her to appointments and that sort of thing. Long term, the second floor of the attached garage, we like to be able to make into space where a caretaker can live and help us take care of our daughter. And hopefully, I mean, she's doing really great, I have to say, and we hope that she'll have some measure of independence. And long term, when she's reached adulthood, we would hope that she'd be able to live in that space and kind of, camping in the backyard, if you will. There are some challenges with that project, which is that the standard size attached garage that's a 24 by 24, basically we would need 44 feet in the back to build it, and we don't have that. And really, there's no space within the setbacks that we have available where we could build this except in the front. And to do that would destroy everything that we love about this house and the reason that we bought it. That's the reason. It's that facade with the 4 columns that this house is part of the Fort Russell Historic District. And we could put an attached garage up there, but I think we'd be murdered if we did. So if we tried to put it on the southern side of the lot, there's simply not enough room for it. It overlaps with where our house already is. So we talked with the city and we talked with our designers, and we thought that the best thing to do was to try to get a variance where we get that 3 feet of extra space on the north side to designate that as the rear. And then we could build this attached garage at 5 feet from the property line on the west side of the building. And that's what we asked for in our initial hearing in April. Ultimately, that request was denied. There was testimony from various neighbors about this being allegedly harmful to the neighbors' interests. And, we disagreed with that, but we took those concerns seriously. And so we went back to the drawing board and we thought, how can we come up with a compromise solution that serves our needs and serves the neighbors' needs and serves the city's needs? And our solution was that we would give up buildable area. We would give up an additional 7 feet of space. We'd decrease our addition in a way that would also minimize the alleged harm to the neighbors. Because the neighbors were saying, at least some of them were, that particularly the neighbor that's directly adjacent to us on the west side, that if we built the garage there, that it would cause a tree to be taken down, it would diminish light, it would potentially cause drainage issues. We disagreed with those concerns, but if those concerns were true, those concerns are equally applicable to the detached garage that we'd be entitled to build at 5 feet from the property line without any variance, without any permission. And that's what we plan to do if we can't get a variance. So we'll build that detached garage at 5 feet from the property line. But we don't want to make people unhappy unnecessarily. And we thought the best thing to do, we'd prefer an attached garage. We'd prefer to not have to go out into the cold to go back into our garage, especially when we're taking our daughter to appointments. And if we can make everybody else happy and minimize any harm, let's do it. So we thought, let's add to the setback from 5 feet to 12 feet. And all of those harms, to the extent they exist at all, are much more minimized or they disappear entirely. So here's a timeline of what we did. Our first request was denied in April. We got to work basically right away on revised plans. And we set up a meeting with our neighbor on the western side, Julie Thomas, to discuss the new meeting. She came over to our home. We reviewed the plans. We answered questions. She got back to us the next month and said at the time she took no position, but she requested that we seek the input of our neighbors and the input of Nels Reese, who chairs the Historic Commission. So we decided to follow up with that. We scheduled a meeting with Mr. Reese to discuss our plans. He was frankly enthusiastic about them. And one of the letters that the board has received out of time is Mr. Reese's letter. He was in New York and wasn't able to submit something on time. But he loves the work of our designers, and he thinks it's consistent with the historical character of the home, and was very enthusiastic about it. We then set up a meeting with our neighbors and with Mr. Reese. We invited everyone to come over. We had a few neighbors attend. Many chose not to. And Mr. Reese expressed his approval. And he suggested that one other thing we could do to allay concerns would be to prepare some additional renderings showing the western side neighbor in our house, which we did. It was an additional expense, but we got our designers to do it. We sent those new renderings around to all our neighbors, and we got crickets, frankly. Didn't hear anything. We submitted our new application in September, and the next thing we heard was in October. And we were happy to receive support for our application from 8 of our neighbors and now from Mr. Reese. But many of the neighbors who had opposed it the first time continued to oppose it. And that was the first we heard from them after 7 months of working through this new application. We think all the criteria for a variance are met here. First criteria, special conditions peculiar to the property. Once again, this home has a uniquely large front setback of more than 60 feet. When you combine the 45 feet that's, I think, part of the buildable area plus the distance from the sidewalk, it's about 60 feet. It leaves very little room to build in the rear because of that. It's one of the things that makes the house beautiful. That's why it's part of the historic district, but it's problematic at the same time. If you compare all the other homes in the area within like a 1 block radius, much shorter setbacks. Nothing compares to what you see at this home. And we think that that meets the unique criteria. The unique criteria listed in the code, they're not exclusive, and we think the setback and the historic character of the home meets criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is that denial would deprive the property owner of rights commonly enjoyed and constitute undue hardship. We decided to address this systematically. So we looked at all the single-family homes within a 1 block radius of ours. There are 40 of them. 9 of those homes have attached garages. 5 of those garages are 2 cars. 4 of those homes have attached garages at 5 feet from the rear setback. So as far back as you could possibly get. And all 4 of those attached garages are on corner lots like ours. And we're not even asking for that anymore. We're asking 12 feet, not 5 feet. We're asking a much, much less. But frankly, if you see that there's 4 of those lots like ours in the neighborhood already, that means that if you have a corner lot in our neighborhood, you've got a 1 in 4 chance of having an attached garage at 5 feet from the rear setback. It's a right that's commonly enjoyed in our neighborhood, and to give it to everybody else, but not to us, would be an undue hardship, especially in light of our circumstances. But even without those circumstances, the fact that it's enjoyed by everyone else meets criteria number 2. You can see the other homes. This is a kitty corner from ours, 328 North Polk Street. It's got an attached garage at 5 feet from the property line. 323 North Howard. This is just up the street from us. The owner of this property has submitted a comment opposing our application, but it's got an attached 2-car garage, very tastefully integrated with the original home at 5 feet from the property line. 415 North Polk. This is on our street. This one integrated the garage at a lower level, but it's still that right at the rear property line, drive in on the corner. Very nicely works with the historical structure. And same is true with 634 East B Street. This is a beautiful home in the neighborhood. I thought the tower was original, but Nels told me it's not. But it's got that garage at the back too, right at the 5-foot setback. Last criteria is that there has to be no harm to the public and no harm to any neighbors. We think that the pervasiveness of attached garages in the neighborhood shows that the use is consistent with precedent and there's no harm to the public. If this already exists commonly in the neighborhood, what's the harm in someone else? There's no dangerous precedent being set. But even if there were some dangerous precedent being set, we think that the fact that the board would grant this on condition of us giving up 7 feet more of buildable area on our lot, we think that that is sufficient protection that ensures that this process is not going to get abused. If the board sets a precedent that, we'll give you a variance sometime, but you have to be prepared to give something up. That condition that we're asking for is the kind of thing that ensures that the variance process doesn't get abused and that property usage is consistent with what you normally see in Fort Russell. And in terms of harm to neighbors, we don't think there is any. Now, we disagree that the harms that have been asserted by some neighbors are harms. Many of our neighbors have said that they regard this as posing no harm. And I don't know how the board can judge between competing visions of whether someone likes the design or doesn't like the design. But even for the things that have been asserted by that neighbor on the western border, Ms. Thomas, we think that all of the harms that she alleges, if they were true, they'd be more true of the detached garage that we're entitled to build as of right at 5 feet from the property line. She's concerned about drainage. We don't think there's any drainage issue, and we think that we would certainly design the property to make sure that drainage is adequately channeled to the appropriate places and avoids going into her basement. But if there's going to be a drainage issue, it's going to be much greater for the structure we're already entitled to build as of right at 5 feet from the line rather than at 12 feet. She's concerned about trees. Now, we think that the trees that exist are on our property line, and the diagram that Lucy showed, and by the way, I thought Lucy's presentation was excellent, but the presentation that she showed shows if those measurements are correct, that shows that the trees are on our property line. But even if they were on the neighbor's property, those trees stand much more risk of harm at 5 feet from the property line, which we're entitled to do as of right, than at 12 feet. And same is true for light. If there's we don't think that the fact that you build someone and it casts a shadow on someone else's lot, that's going to be true all the time. It's going to be true every day of the week. But if that's a harm, it's much more true if you're building at 5 feet than if you're building at 12. We think that our compromise proposal ameliorates any of the harms that we've seen so far here, or that have been alleged so far. And this is one of the renderings that we prepared at Ms. Thomas's request that I think shows this is what it's going to look like in the end. We went out and took measurements of her home. We showed where the trees are located, and we don't have any intent of taking any of them down, but they can comfortably exist with our attached garage in a way that looks very tastefully. All the buildings look nice together. Our garage is architecturally integrated into the main structure. I think that's what Nels likes about the design and what he pointed out in his comments. We think that this serves the neighborhood. We think it serves us. We think it serves our neighbors. So we're asking that the board grant our request. My wife is here, and I think I have a couple more minutes. If she could be permitted to just say a couple of things, I'd love to have her have the opportunity.
You stated that there may be a discrepancy between where the property line lays there, whether it was on the tree line or where you've taken it off some city map or something like that. Has there been an actual survey done by a licensed survey in recent time, or that you've requested?
There hasn't been a survey done. Our architects came out and measured and then came and reconfirmed the measurements on question. There's been, Ms. Thomas has questioned whether they were accurate, but we've checked, and it seems to be in the range of, we worked off the right of way, measuring from both Polk and C Street and kind of triangulated our way into it. And that's what we found. I'll say that while there hasn't been a survey recently, we think that if there's any issue about that property line, we don't think there is, but if there is, granting this extra space, kind of makes it go away. Because if we've got 12 feet from where we think the property line is, there's no risk that we're coming anywhere near where it actually is in terms of the 5-foot setback. And it puts plenty of space between anything that we build and Ms. Thomas's home. I think on an objective basis, my understanding is that there's about 20 feet that would be between our home and Ms. Thomas's home if we build it where we're asking the board to let us build it. You want to say something?
Hi, Anisha Wilson. So I'm going to be a little bit less methodical than my husband, but I just kind of want to summarize his points. I think we've demonstrated that we have met all three criteria, and our front yard is where the majority of our property is. We have very little backyard. We have very little space to build the garage other than exactly where the driveway is now. So we're just simply asking to replace our driveway with a garage. And I'd ask that in a similar fashion as to the April meeting where people were allowed to submit letters late, I would ask that the board allow Mr. Reese's letter in because of his circumstances. I appreciate everybody's concern, but I feel like we made a good faith effort with our neighbors and with the community, and we've incurred lots of expenses to try to make to make this the best situation possible for everybody. So that's it.
Any questions for the applicant at this point? All right, I'd like to start with testimony in favor of the application. If you'd like to come to the podium, state your name, say your piece.
Hi, I'm Christine Cohen. I live in Moscow, Idaho. I actually live in the Fort Russell area as well. And I'm a good friend of the Wilsons. I've known them for many years. And one thing that I just wanted to say is sort of a character witness, I guess, for them is it was definitely a surprise when they were blessed with this new baby. And I have seen them take on the challenges that come with having a special needs child. And they have handled those challenges so well. I've been really just in awe of their demeanor and their ability to accept how often they need to go out of town for health-related issues for their baby. And one of the things that I think should be kept in mind here is that this is something that they are willing to, this is a baby that they have been delighted and brought joyfully into their family as they should. And this new structure would allow them to continue to care for her and provide for her in the way that they have done so well without it. But I have already seen the challenges that come with a hard winter like we have with navigating icy steps. And so I am just strongly in favor of allowing this. Thank you.
Any other testimony in favor of the application? All right, let's start with testimony in opposition to the application.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, staff, and applicant. My name is Kenton Bird. I live at 517 East B Street in Moscow, which is 1 block south and 1/2 block west of the subject property. I should note that I was not invited to the August meeting of neighbors, and nor did I receive any correspondence from the applicant. I am a signer of the letter from the neighbors that was dated October 19th and is now part of the record, so I'm not going to cover any of those points, but I would like to offer a little historical perspective. This book, called A Great Good Country, A Guide to Historic Moscow and Latah County by Lillian Otness, was published in 1983. And on page 87 of the book is a description of the home at 403 North Polk, the Charles L. Butterfield home. The book describes it as one of Moscow's most stately buildings, this town's only example of Greek Revival architecture. Charles Butterfield, a partner in the Butterfield Elder Farm Implement business, came to Moscow from Janesville, Wisconsin, bringing the plans for this neoclassical style house, which he built in 1902, 1903. When built, it was the only house on the block. But what's significant about that is that this house has faced Polk Street since 1903 when it was completed, so 122 years. This request to designate Polk as the front side of the house is inconsistent with nearly 122 years of historical use, and it serves no other purpose than to allow the narrower setbacks to the west and north yards. In my view, this request is a sleight of hand that may be consistent with city code, but flies in the face of historical precedent and sound land use principles. And if my time is still allowed, I have a letter to read that was submitted too late for inclusion in the record by Heather Watts and William Dowd at 502 East C Street. And so you can give me a cutoff if I exceed the time limit.
The letters we got?
You have a copy of that.
You have a copy of the Watts letter?
Yeah.
Okay. If that's in your packet, there's no need to repeat that. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Kenton. Further testimony in opposition?
My name is Caius Romans. I am the neighbor, one of the neighbors, the direct neighbors. I have some issues with this application. In the first place, there are two people here in this room that have Down syndrome's children, or that have sister with Down syndrome, and none of these people needed an attached garage to raise a Down syndrome child. You know, a garage is nice, but it doesn't have to be attached. I think there is a ton of evidence that says it's not necessary to have an attached garage if you have a Down syndrome child. You know, how many people have Down children's syndromes without an attached garage? The second thing is that Neil Rees, I was there when he looked at the house, and he said, this is a very good architectural structure in isolation, not considering the neighbors. That's what he told us. He told me, he told everybody else. And he suggested actually to have those additional drawings being made to see what the impact would be on the neighbors. And actually, when you look at those pictures, you see what we were concerned about, that it's too close. You know, those structures are, basically there's a whole new house built between two houses. It's not nice. Then in addition, we have this letter from the professor of architecture at the University of Idaho. He's the only real architect at that department. He has explored the neighborhood, he has looked at it, and he has given his professional opinion. And he says that he has nothing against the garage, just like all the other examples that were given. There's nothing against the garage if it's small, if it's modest, but not 650 feet, not like a whole house, right? That is a big difference. They call it a garage, but it's a house. Then another issue is the fence line, the borderline. I'm not sure, but I believe that in Idaho, that if there is a fence, and if that fence is recognized for a century as the fence, then you cannot just say, oh, by the way, I'm going to take 4 more feet of your property. Right? 4 feet is 400 square feet of property that is suddenly, without any discussion, just assumed in the application as if it's normal. You know? So I assumed, we all assume that fence is the borderline. That's what we assume. And that means that house, that proposal will come to 7 feet or 8 feet from the border and not 12 feet. Then we did talk about the drainage issues. And I really believe that the garage is the garage, and the new house that is proposed is the first phase of a plan, and it's going to be more structure built. And I don't know exactly what is still going to happen or not. But in the old drawings, it looked like there was a big recreation room right next to it. So a lot of service, a lot of concrete service, a lot of drainage issues. You know, we have an engineer in our street. He has looked at it and he believes there is a big risk of drainage issues. We asked the Wilsons, what would you do if there is a drainage issue? And he said, we'll talk with the neighbor. So then we asked, would you take accountability for any drainage issues? And he said, no, I'm not going to take any accountability. So there is a clear risk. And then there is not going to be any accountability from the applicant. So that is a big risk for the neighbor. You know? Okay, I think these are my main issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional testimony in opposition?
Am I allowed to ask questions? Oh, my name is Terry Huderberg. I live at 511 East C Street, which is across the street from the proposed property addition.
You're allowed to ask questions this way?
That way, but not that way?
Correct.
All right, then I'm not gonna ask questions because you won't know the answers. I was aware that two neighbors, just two, Julie and Caius, were invited to learn about the addition. I am not aware of any other neighbors who were ever invited or consulted or told anything about this until we received a postcard in the mail, and only a few of us did, because I don't know the rules on that, but only a few of us did. And then it wasn't until it was posted online that we could see what this new proposal was going to be compared to the old one. Just want to clear that up. None of us were asked, none of us were consulted, except for two people.
The postcard requirement, you can ask to Mike.
Okay, so like 4 of us got the postcard?
State code requires just directly adjacent properties. So it would just be to the west. We go across the street. So I don't know how many properties.
It was like 4 or 5. Yeah. Okay, so like postcard was our notification. And then the neighbors that weren't directly across got no notification until we were able to see that. That's being cleared up. That said, my sister has Down syndrome. I grew up with a sister with Down syndrome. I just wanted to say, I take a lot of issue with using your child to do something like this to the neighborhood.
Say again, what did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Using your child to do something like
I
this.
see, I see. Sure.
Additional testimony in opposition.
Hi there. Sorry, we're back. My name is Julie Thomas. I live at 514 East C Street, and my property borders the Wilsons on the west side. I wanted to clarify that I did not give my approval for the Wilsons revised plan. I consistently voiced my concerns about the size, especially the height. That's big for me, of the proposed garage right next to my home, and about drainage, the resultant possible drainage issues. Both concerns were dismissed. Mr. Wilson stated he could build as large as he wishes and assured me that drainage would not be a problem. The meeting I attended felt less like a discussion and more like a presentation of a decision already made. I did not give my support to the revised plan at this meeting. I was taken aback by the sudden claim that the actual property line is 4 feet closer to my house. To my knowledge, the property line has never been in dispute. I remain deeply concerned about the mass and scale of the proposed structure. I appreciate the drawings offered by the Wilsons architects. They make it even more clear that the massiveness of this design would have a direct visual and physical impact on my home and will alter the character of our neighborhood. The lot simply does not support a build of this magnitude. When I bought my home, I did so because this neighborhood valued its history. The Wilsons' earlier remodel was a model of sensitive design and even earned the Orchid Award, as we mentioned earlier, in 2019 from the Moscow Historic Preservation Commission, an effort I admired and that encouraged me to invest here. Unfortunately, this new expansion undermines that integrity. Without formal historic design protections, we as homeowners must rely on one another to preserve the unique character of this district. And for that reason, I respectfully urge the board to deny this variance request. Thank you.
Additional testimony in opposition.
Hi, my name's Alexis Bailey, and I live at 323 North Howard, as the green craftsman in the packet here in Moscow. I wrote you guys a letter, so I said a lot of what I wanted to say for that. I do want to say that a lot of this has felt like the new designation of where the property line is, and we're giving up 7 feet, but like really that's not yours to give up. It just has all felt like if we don't do this, we're going to build right up against your property line a detached garage. It feels a little bit like bullying to kind of get your way with it, personally. But the thing is, while they could build a detached garage within 5 feet of the property line, as they mentioned in their packet that I read, they realize that they cannot build as tall as they would want to build with a 17-foot top plate. It would have to be 14. But also the other rule that you pointed out, that it couldn't take up more than 50% of that setback. And using their drawings, I looked at that, and that would be more of a 625 square foot footprint as opposed to the 912 square foot footprint that they are requesting happen now. So I also played a little bit with their plans, and I believe that within their setback that they already have, they could have a single car detached garage with a mudroom with a second floor apartment within what they already have in their boundary. Certainly, their setbacks are very large in the front. I don't really think that's a hardship. I realize they want to preserve that because they like the way their house looks. I think it would be a shame, sure, to build something as large as they want to build on the house really in any direction, but that is their right if they choose to do it. I feel the burden of hardship, well, I don't feel, the burden of hardship is on the applicant. I don't feel they've met that burden. I feel that they would need you to give them the variance. And once you do, even if you say it's 12 feet or it's whatever, that is what it is. And they can turn around and really build whatever they want because the direction of their house has changed. So that's one option. But also, what we love about Fort Russell is the spaces between the houses. We don't want it to become the new way of building where you're trying to take up every square foot of a lot and build right on top of each other. I mean, again, that's your right if you do it within the parameters of your setbacks, but they would need you to grant this one. And I strongly encourage you to hold up your ruling that you had before and stick with it and deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional testimony in opposition? Going once, going twice. Testimony of a general nature, neither in favor or against, just a general nature.
Hello, Chris Wayne at 511 East C Street. In a general nature, we want you to have a garage. We don't want you to not have a garage, right? It's all about, Julie not seeing the sun until afternoon, right? And so it's, again, I think that you can work with designers. Yeah.
Talk this way.
Sure. I think that they can work with designers and they can figure something out. The other thing, I just wanted to notice that if they move their front of their house to C Street, where's the front door? You know what I mean? If you look at that picture right there with the garage, if they're moving the front to C Street, I don't see a welcoming spot. Anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you very much. Any other testimony of a general nature? Rebuttal, applicant, Lincoln? Maisha?
This is just to respond to somebody's comment about using our child with special needs. We've lived in the house for close to 9 years now, and we could have applied for this, when we put all of our money into renovating the house and I think bettering the neighborhood and the property values around, but we didn't. And the reason why we are requesting the garage is to accommodate our child with special needs. So there's no using here. It's a legitimate need.
Okay.
A few comments I want to share in rebuttal. First of all, it was news to me that people hadn't heard about the meeting. I just want to be clear that when we wanted to set up a neighbor meeting, I emailed Caius. I said, Caius, can I have email addresses for several of the neighbors? I said, can I have emails for Julie, for Tara, for Kirsten, for Kenton, for Marilyn, for Gary, and for Chris? And Caius sent me email addresses. And so I emailed those people. And then Caius said, several people said they can't come to the meeting, but I'll be in touch with them and I will send them a summary of the meeting, which he did. And so I assumed that, and Caius graciously asked me to review that summary of the meeting. And I assumed that the email addresses that I'd received were correct. If they weren't correct, I'm sorry for that, but there was certainly no intention of excluding any of those people. And I did hear from Gary had responded and said he got the email. So I assumed that everything had gone through as it was supposed to. So I'm going to, moving along from that, I want to note a couple of things. To Chris's point about the corner designation, I want to clear up. I don't speak for the city, obviously, but my understanding is that designating which side is the front and which side is the side for a corner doesn't mean you have to change your front door or even that you have to change your USPS address or any of that stuff. It's just a formality of, where's the majority of the space going to be and where's the smaller amount going to be on your side. Caius mentioned that Nels Reese had, in his view, said that the design was only good in isolation. Nels has now submitted a letter. I think that letter speaks for itself on the quality of the design. And I think in light of Nels's role, both formerly at the University of Idaho and now as part of the Historic Commission, I think it deserves a lot of weight. Caius pointed out that this would be a whole new house between two houses. I think it's actually the opposite when you think about it, because for one, it's attached. And for another, what we're allowed to do as of right is to build really a whole new house detached even closer to the neighbor's property line at 5 feet. And we can still have the second floor. We can still have the ADU. Alexis had mentioned the calculations about square footage. I don't think those calculations are accurate. I think we can actually build a larger detached garage than she's suggesting. But in any event, it's clear that we can build a detached 2-car garage with an apartment over it, even closer to the property line than that we're asking for in this application. Caius, I want to just respond to something. Caius mentioned that I'd said I would take no accountability, for drainage problems at the house. I may be a lawyer, but that's not something I would say. What's that? Well, that is something a lawyer would say, that a lawyer would not sign something. That's right. But it's not the same as saying I'm not responsible for my property, because 100% I am. I think I owe a duty as a neighbor and as a Christian. And that's why we've worked very closely with Julie. We've invited her over multiple times to discuss this. We are going to make sure that any engineering that goes into this, and that's a separate phase with the building department, that it addresses all of these concerns. And I just want to make a final couple of points in response to some of the neighbor concerns that have been raised. I might not cover all of these. So on criteria 1, I wanted to point out what some of the submissions that you've received say, because I think some of the submissions actually support, even when they're opposing us, they actually support why this should be granted. The letter from the Sullivans, Brandy Sullivan, who used to be on city council and part of the Historic Commission, I think she was one of the ones who gave us the Orchid Award. She acknowledges that the home has a very large front setback. And she says, well, that allows for building the 2-car garage attached in the front. But I think that just illustrates exactly what we wouldn't want to do and what's unique about this property. I think everyone who loves this home in the neighborhood would not want to see an attached 2-car garage on the front of this house. The letter from several of our neighbors highlighted this, and I have to say I don't fully understand it. But it says that our desire to accommodate a child with special needs is not a hardship specific to the land, but rather that it's self-imposed and avoidable. And I don't understand fully what that means, but giving it the most charitable construction, I think that it misses the point. Because the point of the variance criteria is that the hardship is one that relates to what's commonly enjoyed in the neighborhood and whether the ordinary code would prevent you from having it. And what's commonly enjoyed in the neighborhood is attached garages and attached garages on corner lots at 5 feet from the property line. And it would be hardship for us. We reject the idea that our daughter and caring for her is a hardship. But we do think that our neighbors being allowed to have something that we can't have, that's a hardship. And I think the other letters show this because they all acknowledge that this is something that's common in the neighborhood. There are these attached garages, and they say you should disregard them because we don't know whether they were approved or permitted or anything like that. I don't think that gets it. I think the point is you have to look at what's there. What is everyone else enjoying? And I have no reason to think that those other garages were not permitted or that they predated the current version of the code. But the fact is if they are there and no one is being injured by those other attached garages in the neighborhood, there's no problem with adding one here. Just to emphasize, I think Alexis had said, oh, well, I think there's ways for you to add a garage on the southern side. It looks okay when you don't put the dimensions on it, but when you put the dimensions on it, sort of the very smallest footprint of a 2-car attached garage of 24 by 24 doesn't fit. It overlaps with the existing house and would incidentally block our kitchen. The last thing in terms of the harm to neighbors, these were the alleged harms that were pointed out in the letter from several of our neighbors. They said it would crowd its western neighbor, increase impervious surfaces, and risk altering natural drainage. I just want to highlight again that if any of those are true, and we don't necessarily think they are, but if they're true, it's a much bigger problem with a detached garage at 5 feet from the property line. That's what we'll build if we have to. I don't want to send my wife out into, to have to walk through the elements to go back inside to take the baby to the appointments every day. But if that's what we can get, that's what we'll build. I think that's more of a harm to the neighbors than what we're proposing, that compromises our interests and helps serve theirs. Same in terms of alleged shade and visually dominating things. A garage that's at 5 feet is going to dominate much more. It's going to cause much more problems of sunlight than one that's at 12 feet. And then there's the alleged reinterpretation of a long-established property line. It seems that there's a lot of concern by neighbors who are not on that property line about where that property line lies. I'll confess that I don't understand why that concern exists. I understand that if Julie's concerned about it. Respectfully, I'm not going to address that, but respectfully, we hired architects and designers twice and went out and had them do the measurements. These are experienced people. They're licensed. Karen Owsley started the job for us. She came back and reconfirmed her measurements. It's established how you do these things. And she determined where the property lines are, and where she drew them is consistent with where Lucy's illustrations have them in the presentation that she gave the city. But even if there's an actual dispute about the property line, and it's fairly common in Fort Russell, it's an old neighborhood, that you find that there's a fence that's not actually where the property line is supposed to be. That happens quite frequently, as anyone in Fort Russell knows. But even if we're wrong about the property line, the fact that we're pushing this 12 feet back gives us more space, more leeway, rather than less. We're trying to be gracious here. We're not trying to be difficult. Last thing, the Sullivan letter highlighted, to be fair, it opposed us. But it said, I want to acknowledge the applicant's efforts to reduce the impact on their neighbors to the west. And it said that this was a smaller request than the one we made in April. And it said, if this were to be approved, asked, is there a mechanism for ensuring that this 12-foot setback, which is greater than the 5-foot required by code, to be preserved in the future, for example, if there are different owners? I think that's an excellent question, because that's exactly what we're proposing. We're proposing that the board grant this variance on condition that the property agree to a permanent setback where we've indicated it in our plans. And that will mean that no other additions from our house at any other point in the property would go past that line. And that would apply to future owners as well. Any future owner would be subject to that same variance and that same condition. And that's a protection to the neighbors, it's a protection to Julie, and it's a protection to the precedent that this board sets for Fort Russell and for the standards of R3 zoning. I just want to conclude by saying, there's a remark in one of the letters that said that the neighborhood devoted many hours in good faith to the April hearing, only to find the petitioner disregarding the board's decision and the community's unanimous concern. And that we're burdening the neighborhood and the city. And I just have to say, we don't see it that way. We felt that we went above and beyond here. We took the concerns seriously. We paid for revised plans. We wanted to compromise, We wanted to give something up to get the thing that mattered most to us. We scheduled multiple meetings. We thought we were emailing everybody. Apparently we weren't. But I know that Caius sent around an email summary of the meeting to everybody. At least I understand that he did. He told me he did. I understood that everyone had received the summary and was conferring about this. We consulted Nels Reese. We brought in the foremost voice on historic preservation in Moscow to talk about this. We prepared additional renderings. We did every single thing that we were asked to do. We took 7 months to do it. And the first that anyone told us that they opposed it was after we submitted the application, after all these emails and all these meetings. And to be told that we're not acting in good faith and that we're exploiting our daughter's disability here, and that we're the bullies, it just doesn't fit with reality. So we'd ask the board to approve our variance. We think it's a reasonable request. We think it meets the requirements of code. And unless there are any questions, I think that's all I have to say.
Any questions for the applicant at this point? Okay,
Are we able to ask questions of the applicant subsequent to this?
after the hearing? That's a no. So you have to ask me now.
Okay. So am I able to ask a question of staff prior to asking a question of the applicant? Could you remind us why we're here? We've heard a lot of information about blessings from God and handicapped children and property lines and trees and shadows. Why are we here tonight?
Because the applicant submitted a variance request for a proposed garage addition to their residence.
And what is it we're making a determination on? It's not whether or not we're doing a favor to handicapped kids. What are we making a determination on exactly?
Well, there's 3 relevant criterion standards that you have to essentially justify to approve a variance. And so you're reviewing those relevant criterion standards based upon the applicant's application.
I appreciate that. I'm being rhetorical, but there's a task at hand here that isn't related to a lot of this superfluous information. And I think we need to focus on the task at hand. I hope the commission appreciates that. I do have a question for you. Can you tell me, would you be able to build a 1-car garage that's attached to your house without a variance?
We would be able to build a 1-car garage, but I think that there's 2 points that go along with that. One is that we have 2 cars. And 2 is that in terms of what we're trying to do in preserving the architectural character of the house and the neighborhood, that the 1-car garage attached would frankly look silly at the back of the house appended on there. But a larger structure corresponds to the larger mass of the main house and makes sense architecturally. And our designers worked really hard to make these architectural tie-ins that make the two make sense together. And I fully appreciate your comment about what are we here for. And as an attorney, I want to highlight the 3 criteria for a variance. And I think we've met every single one of them. The reason we're submitting this application is because of our daughter's special needs. And since that's been the subject of some of the comments, we felt the need to address it. But in terms of whether we meet the standards, we meet the standards because of the characteristics of the property itself and of what we're allowed to build by right and what the characteristics of our neighbors' lots
I
are.
have another question for you. Thank you for that. I have another question for you. When you surveyed the neighborhood to see how many attached garages existed currently, how big of an area did you survey?
I went with basically the same area that's reflected in Lucy's presentation, which is 1 block radius around our house. And since our house is on a corner lot, it was relatively easy to do. We identified 40 single family homes.
So 1 block around.
1 block radius, yeah.
Anything else? Good. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to read the 2 letters into the record. The first one is dated November 3rd, 2025. Members of the Moscow Board of Adjustment, we wish to express our opposition to the setback variance that is being requested for the second time on the property of 403 North Polk Street. We own a home on the corner lot in the same block as this property. According to the April meeting minutes, the board concluded at that time that not one of the 3 criteria needed for approval had been met. It is our strong opinion that none of the circumstances that led to the board unanimously rejecting the application on its first attempt have substantially changed. More importantly, the requested variance is simply not necessary to meet the owner's stated desire to build a suitable garage facing the south side of the lot on East C Street. Other letters submitted by Fort Russell residents capture numerous other salient arguments in opposition to the application, including negative impacts on adjacent neighbors and more broadly on the historic character and the sightlines of the neighborhood. And we concur with those arguments. We respect and fully appreciate the owner's desire to provide adequate care for their child. However, it is our opinion that the rejection of this variance would not impose undue hardship, given that a suitable garage in keeping with the character and charm of Fort Russell could be construed within the existing setback requirements for the property. Respectfully, Heather Watts and William Dowd. Next one dated November 4th. I'm writing this letter of support of Davis Wilson addition to the historic Butterfield House located at 403 North Polk. I'm a longtime resident of Moscow and happen to own another historic Moscow home. I am the chair of the Moscow Historic Preservation Commission. However, I am not speaking for the Preservation Commission, as the Wilson family did not present this project to the commission. I speak as a private citizen. As you must know, the Butterfield House is one of the notable historic structures in Fort Russell. It is one of Moscow's only neoclassic homes, and in my opinion, deserves special attention. The intersection of Polk and C Street is very likely one of the most special residential intersections found in Fort Russell. The house was built before automobiles, but given the pressures of the modern age, great houses do seem to deserve appropriate garages. As you know, the Fort Russell Historic District does not have any overriding historic guidelines, so the future of Fort Russell's historic homes often relies on the wisdom of such boards as your own. As a professor of architecture and a licensed architect, I would observe that you will seldom find a more competent project than this one designed by Harvey and Points. Yes, it has a modern flair, but it also relates in more than subtle ways to the historic Butterfield House. As a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I am well aware of the angst that change brings to us all, but change is part of our world, and what we look for is thoughtful and well-considered change. I do believe the Wilson Residence Addition is a thoughtful project and deserves your careful consideration. Thank you, Nels Reese. Any other questions before I close the hearing? Hearing's closed. The board like to start discussion. Marshall?
Well, I'll give a couple of thoughts to get us started anyway. First of all, the property was posted correctly, and the mailings were done according to state code. So any of the neighbors that weren't invited to the particular meeting, there was still plenty of time to see that it was properly noticed to be able to come tonight. And there's a lot of talk about accommodations for a disabled child. And even though that's the ethical thing to do to help any disabled child, it's not something that this board can look at. It isn't something that we can take into account because it's out of our preview. And even though it helps our hearts, it's not what we do here. I think there is some justification or a few justifications for a variance. You did a good job of discussing the criteria, and I agree with most of it. We look at the neighborhood, and there are existing accessory structures that are either meet code or closer than they need to be. And where how long they've been pre-existing, I don't know, but they are there in that neighborhood. Okay. The other thing I look at is the neighborhood itself. It's beautiful historic neighborhood, but those beautiful historic neighborhoods come with problems. They had huge public right-of-way. They have the same public right-of-way that Highway 95 does. So it takes up properties that would normally be associated with the homes, but they've got these huge right-of-ways, which affect setbacks. And when you look at the neighborhood itself, they've got narrow streets up there, parking on one side. By adding more off-street parking is a bonus for the neighborhood. It's a bonus for the city to get those cars off the street for snow plowing, street sweeping, bicycle riding, whatever. To get more off-street parking is a good thing, especially in a neighborhood where the streets are so narrow. The justification about being able to build a detached accessory structure, I mean, that means a lot. That a detached accessory structure would be an eyesore in that neighborhood, in my opinion. And even though they're allowed to do it by right, they choose to try to do something that fits the neighborhood better. So I think there are some justifications for it. And I'd like to hear from the rest of you.
Go ahead.
Well, this is hard because on the surface, one might say, it's only 3 feet. What's the big deal? Well, knowing the fact that this is brought to us a second time and hearing the testimony of the neighborhood and the applicant, it is a big deal that forces us to be pretty careful in our scrutiny. But as I look at this and I remember my my comments the last time, I haven't really learned anything that really changes my position from what I see, and I'm holding myself accountable specifically to the way the criteria 1, 2, and 3 is written. Special conditions and/or circumstances exist which are peculiar to the property, such as size, shape, topography, or location. I see that the house is peculiar because of its 60-foot sidewalk to the entryway, but I don't see that the property has any special conditions that are impacted. It's pretty similar to other footprints in that neighborhood. So if I hold myself to that interpretation, I'd say there's no special condition. If there's no special condition, then criteria 2 doesn't apply either. The applicant talks quite a bit in the application and in the testimony about the harm to the neighborhood or the harm to neighbors close in the period. And yet criteria 3 says granting of the variance will not be in conflict with the public interest. And then it goes on, or injurious to the property of persons. I look at the first half of that, and there certainly remains quite a bit of public interest that they see as a conflict in this particular project. So I personally see the project not accommodating any special consideration for criteria 1, 2, and 3. I certainly emotionally emphasize, or I should say, sympathize for the applicant, and my heart goes out to them, and I certainly appreciate all the effort they've put in, again, speaking for myself. But I guess that's how I interpret the criteria, and that's how I look at the project.
I was prepared to make a similar comment. It's number 1 stands out to me as we're really looking at the lot itself, not the structure, and making a determination about whether there are some special considerations related to that lot that would justify a variance. And in this case, this is a pretty uniformly sized lot. Topography is relatively consistent across the lot. In fact, it's a large lot, larger than many of the other lots in the neighborhood. Fortunately or unfortunately, the builder of this very unique home chose to set the home back far from the sidewalk when they built it, and that created limitations for future additions. Now that we're in an age of wanting garages and accommodation for modern amenities, but that doesn't change that the lot itself is nothing special.
I feel similarly. I like that there's still space for a good sized 1-car garage that can be attached as well. And so with the current setbacks, that doesn't negate that need that has been spoken of. But as far as looking at all of the setbacks and changing the front face of the house, I'm not sure that I see that that is a necessity.
Nothing.
I have to agree with both sides. Anytime you can get cars off of a narrow street, it's a good thing. This particular case, I'm not sure it's the right thing. Kind of like you said, you know, we don't deal with the emotional part in here. We're looking at where the rubber meets the road, truthfully. And I actually concur with the fact that I still don't understand changing the house has had the front on Polk for over 100 years, and all of a sudden, just because of this, we're going to change the front. Now, I know that that's allowed, and whether it's allowed or not, again, is it right? We don't have, and this is something that had been contentious before, is the city of Moscow does not have any, and we have always shied away from them, even when you were mayor, of design review to stay within the character of Fort Russell. And I agree that the design that Nels, that's coming before us, and I agree with what Nels has said about, it does tie in well with the property. It does also make it dwarf the house right next to it, and if you're looking at it from Polk Street, I think one of the reasons that they put the house back originally was to give it that big stately presence that you would get by having that expansive lawn in front of it. But again, does that pose a unique thing for the district? And that's what the district is a collection of beautiful old homes that, are the basis of a historical district. Are we changing it? Yeah. Can we change it? Well, we can, because we don't have any kind of design review, which is something that I think when we have a historical district like that, we should have some kind of design review process, which, like I said, we have always shied away from it. So it leaves us in a conundrum of, what do we do? So I haven't decided where I'm standing on this one yet.
Well, I think that in my own mind, I could justify the variance. I would hate to deprive the applicant of something that is afforded to other homes in the neighborhood. Whether they are architecturally desirable with what they were added onto, I'm not going to say one way or another.
Right.
Some are, some aren't. But I think with the amount of effort that the applicant went through in demonstrating that he's trying to make the new structure tie in with the existing neighborhood and the home, I think they've done a good job. I think there are some criteria that make this lot and other lots in this neighborhood unique with the narrow streets and the setbacks,
And the
the
80-foot
huge
setbacks,
right
yeah.
of ways. I think that is unique. We do not design residential developments in the city like they are up at the Fort Russell. Myself, I think there is justification.
Okay.
I would point out that there's an intersection in Moscow, and this is an extreme example, admittedly, but there's an intersection in Moscow at 6th and Jackson that we all know doesn't align. How did we get there, right? How did we get there? We got there because somebody approved that. And I think it's a slippery slope when you start approving little bits and pieces, and those little bits and pieces later on, the next neighbor will, you approve theirs. Why can't I have this with 3 more feet? So I'm strongly opposed to your comments, Marshall, respectfully, because I think that it's a mistake to open that gate and go down that slippery slope.
If we didn't open the gate at some time, we would never approve a variance.
Well, the criteria here does allow for us to use that as a way to approve variances, and we normally do, frankly. But we normally don't have 50 people in the room either.
Right.
I'm glad we got 50 people. in there.
Yeah, makes us relevant.
So let's say that they build the detached garage, right? So in theory, how big exactly would that be? Do we know about what they can, how many square feet that would be? Could be?
A detached accessory structure could be up to 1,000 square feet and go up to 5 feet to the rear property line
Okay.
with certain height restrictions.
And the one that we have here is,
913.
okay, so it's about the same size. And then would that one have to set further back on the, on C Street?
No.
No. So it could just be right there, just as big.
At least 2 feet from the house.
Okay. Yeah.
The height restrictions are 14 feet to the wall plate, but the total height could be up to 35. Accessory structures cannot cover more than 50% of the required rear backyard, yes.
Thank you.
We haven't calculated that yet.
Our understanding from our architects is that we could build substantially the same structure consistent with the code at the 5 feet line. The one exception would be that the roof plate would be at 14 feet rather than at 17 feet. That would be an architectural problem, but it wouldn't change how much space or square footage we'd be allowed to have. It would just make the way that it would tie into the existing structure less ideal.
Thank you.
You guys talk about all the other garages, but all those other garages are much smaller. They are not so high as this. It's a totally different dimension. It seems like you don't see that difference. But I'm surprised about that because all the other garages are really small.
Okay,
This one's huge.
so I got to stop you there. The public hearing is closed. So,
Let's see other people talk, I think.
I know.
I also have reservations about the fact that criteria number 2 has been met. I'm not sure that a survey in a 1-block area is conclusive. And I think about my area of Fort Russell, and I'm not aware of any immediate neighbors who have attached garages. I certainly don't have an attached garage. And so is less than 25% of the immediate neighbors having attached garages satisfy criteria 2?
I think in a historic neighborhood, it's going to be a hodgepodge. Yeah. I'm not sure that just because there's other people with garages that in a historic neighborhood, it can create a precedent that allows everybody to have one, because in a historic neighborhood, not every property has a lot that is conducive to it.
I guess I disagree on that. I think there are so many properties that would be able to put a double car garage, and for one reason or another, they don't, but they are allowed to.
If it fits with the lot parameters and the size and the shape of the lot, and it doesn't exceed the height and it doesn't take up more than 50%, then it can be approved. But there are many properties where that is just not true. And you could survey, I think, Fort Russell and find many, many properties where there's really no viable scenario to add a garage. So I think you have to, what I guess the case that I'm making is that in a neighborhood like Fort Russell, where you're dealing with historic homes that were built at a time that predated the standard norm of garages, that you have to decide on a case-by-case basis if it fits.
So the structure is going to be built either way, correct? That's kind of my understanding,
kind of what
right?
I'm hearing,
So
yeah.
either we can do it in a way to where there is the extra 12 feet, or they could build it up to 5 feet, like, right? Essentially, that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're talking about here. Like, when we're getting down to it, I understand all the other points and variances and, or precedents, which is important. But then there's that issue as well, that it'll
Well,
probably.
for better or worse, I think that's not for us to discuss today. You know, the Wilsons make the case that they're going to build a structure regardless, and the alternative structure would present a hardship to the neighbors, but we have not heard that testimony from the neighbors today, and we're not here to discuss that alternative scenario. We're only here to discuss the variance. So, you know, that scenario is a little bit irrelevant to our conversation.
And by right, they would be able to build that structure without coming back to us at all, so.
Correct.
And one of the jobs of the building department is to check setbacks.
Right.
And they would have some relevant information to be able to do that.
Somebody's got to make a motion at some point.
Well, I'd make a motion, but I think it's gonna fail, so I'd rather, I'd rather hear from.
Okay.
Well, I'll move that board reject the application for, as presented to the board, and ask the staff to prepare the relevant conditions and standards.
Okay. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I'll start at that side. On the record, aye or nay? Aye or nay?
Oh, yay.
Yay. No.
I'll go to you first.
Okay, sure. I want to make sure I was,
Yeah.
yay.
Yay.
Nay. Okay. So the motion passes and the variance is not approved. And I would like to direct the staff to create the relevant criteria and standards for us to meet at our next meeting next Tuesday? Here? Monday here. Is that right? Okay.
You have a second for that? Is that a motion, Mr. Chair?
No, that was, we already did all that part. That was my direction to you guys. Anybody have anything for the good of the order? Our next meeting is next Monday at 5:30 here in the council chambers.
And I won't be here, Jennifer. I think you know that. Don't you know that?
Oh, okay. I'd like to thank you all for coming. Have a great night. Meeting is adjourned.